Well, hi, it's Mog. Sorry, it's a bit crazy with the special effects and everything. But fantastic, Tim Prusard. Good to see you. Well, I can't exactly see you, but anyway, you get the drift. Uh, what I'm doing, I'm gonna try and do a regular thing on Facebook Live, but with all sorts of things really in the future. But tonight I'm gonna just do you half of a lecture. It's quite a long lecture. I'm just going to go through a lecture that I did the other day on Egyptian magic, and you can make comments. And I've got some pictures. I don't know backwards, but if I tell you what they are, maybe you could Google them as we go along, and that'll be good. And in the future, I've got some ideas, and I say we, the friends and collaborators, have got some ideas for stuff that kind of enliven our magic, really. All you can see almost all of the shroud of Nuit, which is based on which is actually on unbleached calico. It's based on the coffin of Seti the First, and it's an image of the goddess Nuit embracing the dead. So I thought you might like to see that. At some point, I'll point you at. I don't know, I've got some pictures somewhere. I don't know if they're going to come up. Hang on. Hang 5. If I go sideways. You can't turn your phone while live, it says. Alright. So I can't do that. It's told me off. Okay, so you'll just have to bear with me, and I'm going to go through my lecture, which is the subject, right? I gave a talk on Heka last weekend, which, as most of you will know, hi Anna, is kind of Egyptian magic. Anna, weren't you there on last weekend? I hope you don't mind. It's going to be the sort of same sort of thing I did last time. But maybe I'll actually get through some of it tonight. Anyway, so it's Heka, which is, as I say, Egyptian magic, and subtitled The Screaming Mummies. So actually you could Google that, Screaming Mummy, and you'll get a rather interesting picture of a screaming mummy. And maybe you could share that with me. Hello, Steve. If my sound is bad, then tell me. I don't know what I can do about it, but you could tell me anyway. That'll be good. And hi, Anna. Okay, so Egyptian magic Heka, which I have to tell you is of a far more exalted significance than the stuff that you find in later times in the Coptic tradition, even though that's quite interesting, and even our Western approximation. So Egyptian magic is a very much higher status. And I want to say, as magical practitioners, we're sort of learning a lot more over the last 20 years about our origins, which we kind of knew intuitively. And as we learn more, we're changing our magical practice. So that's part of the reason, really, of talking about origins of magic. I know this is a Setian group, but we're kind of, a lot of Setians are practitioners of magic, and Shalom DT, and welcome everybody else to the group. But you can't really get very far in the study of Egyptian magic without encountering the Setian stuff, and I think you'll find that there's going to be some Setian stuff in what I do, and in the future it'll be kind of even more so. So hopefully you've Googled the term Screaming Mummy, which says a gruesome story. So I'm going to start with a gruesome horror story, really. But even from a horror story, even from this horrible artifact of the Screaming Mummy, we can learn some of the tricks of the trade, which is my idea. And the other thing I wanted to talk about as well is, if I get onto it, is the issue of witches in ancient Egypt. So that's the kind of, maybe as far as I get today, and then I'll break off and I'll do a second bit which will deal with some interesting magical stuff, but that might be for next transmission. Okay, so hopefully you find a picture. There's a famous crime story which many of you may know, true crime mystery in ancient Egypt, which we might call a conspiracy in the harem. And this occurs in the harem or personal quarters of the temple of King Ramesses III. And King Ramesses III was one of the followers of Set, really. They were the Setian pharaohs. And in fact, if you go into the temple at Medinet Habu, you'll see some images of Set in there. So most of the Ramesses were famous for being followers of Set. So we're in the kind of right territory, really. Anyway, the thing about the Screaming Mummy is called Man-E from the royal cache at Deir Bahri. Is thought to be a relative of Ramesses III called Pentawari. And if you see the picture, he was the person who tried to kill Ramesses III, and we should say he didn't just try to kill him, he was successful. He successfully killed Ramesses III, and we know this because there was a trial, and well, there are various reasons why we know this, and the conspirators were burnt alive, and their ashes were spread to the four winds of the crossroads. Thus, they're denied proper funeral and killed in the afterlife, which is, again, quite an important piece of magic. Pentawere, one of the victim's sons, so his son is trying to kill his father, basically. He had a lot of sons, so maybe there wasn't a lot of love lost between them. He, because he was a slightly higher status, was allowed to kill himself. There you go. Maybe that's better, I don't know. But he obviously couldn't, he probably couldn't go through with it in the end, and they helped him out. They cut his throat, and hence the Screaming Mummy, which hopefully you've seen the pictures of now. After his body was found, he was wrapped in a goat skin and buried, which is ritually impure. His brain and his viscera were not taken out of his body, and he was buried in that state, which, again, if you studied Setian stuff, you'll find the issue of execration burial is quite... it takes you right into the heart of a lot of Setian magic, in fact. The way sometimes the way you do an execration burial is almost like the way the Setians would like to be buried anyway. So the idea of execration burial is to prevent rebirth, right, and to forget the person's name. So all these mummies, including the murderer and his victim, were found together in a mass tomb because there was a lot of grave robbery in Egypt in ancient times. So, which is another scandal of this part of the world. And when they discovered that all the goodies were being taken out of the tombs, which is quite one of the reasons why hardly any people, that's why you find so few intact tombs, really, because people are always robbing each other. But they did gather up all the bodies, rewrapped them in bandages, and stuck them all in one mass tomb. So the murderer and his victim were kept together. It could be that, I think it's probably true that Pentaware's, the Screaming Mummy's original tomb had other elements to it that emphasised the kind of dark execration Setian element to the burial, really, the reversed nature of his burial. And we can learn a lot from that kind of execration. You wouldn't think so, but you kind of can. You don't have to quite go as far as that, but there are little clues. And you might see echoes of this even in the modern world when people talk about the Daesh, the cutthroats, or the terrorists, if you like, that people say maybe we shouldn't focus on them so much. We should defocus. We should forget their names. We should execrate them. Maybe even, which would have been an older, more primal way of doing things. We certainly shouldn't put them on a pedestal. Anyway, the Screaming Mummy, if you look, he has been strangled. So he didn't kill himself, he was strangled. Now, the reason why this trial and records are so interesting to us would be that magic was used in the murder, right? not in the punishment. It was used in the punishment, but it was used in the murder itself. If you like, you read these texts. You, as I say, you're playing with someone's names. the magic, what happened is I think that because these people are quite well educated, they have access to what's called the House of Life, right, which is a kind of magical library where all sorts of books that tell you how to do the magic. Now they didn't kill Ramesses III by magic; they killed him by cutting his throat. Uh, but they used magic to subdue all the guards in the temple, because the temple is actually where they live as well. The royal family live in the temple itself. When I later on, if you Google the temple of Medinet Habu, you'll see it's a very very well preserved temple, and a bit kitsch in some ways. But the royal family lived kind of at the back. It's kind of like a fortress. Um, because I suppose you say they weren't a very popular family. We have to face up to this. Not all Setians were popular, you know. Anyway, so check that out for yourself. One of the interesting things they do is so they use magic to put the guards to sleep, but the guards, right, having been put to sleep and not done their duty and allowed the king to be killed, they don't escape, right? They don't say, "Oh, it wasn't our fault." They were executed as well. Everybody involved in the plot, working class to royal family, suffer quite nasty fates, really. And as I say, one of the things they do is change their names so that you never actually know of the culprits of the crime. You never really know their names. Anyway, Ramesses III, the Setian pharaoh, or one of the later Setian pharaohs, so it's said, was actually, it seems to have been quite unpopular. Well, you might guess that by the fact that his own family killed him off. But I think he was probably unpopular in general in the area. There's evidence of that from his the fact that he lived in this huge fortress, really, which when you look at it, that's what it looks like. He did rule a long time, and it was a time of lots of battles between himself and the invaders of Egypt, in which he did okay, according to his own records. But as I say, the evidence in the temple itself, I mean, one of the weird things is that the hieroglyphs are cut that are almost inches really, really deep. They're deep enough for birds to kind of nest in the hieroglyphs on the sides of the temple. Um, and that is maybe people say that's an indication of a kind of egomaniac. Well, look, I mean, pharaohs and kings were all a little bit egomaniacs, really, trying to imitate gods, but maybe he went further than most. But he certainly wasn't popular, and he wasn't popular with his own family, thus he got himself murdered. Okay, so the things I was drawing from that is magic of execration and magic of messing up someone's name. Right now, we know from the Setian point of view, we know this because we tend to get it from the other point of view, because the hieroglyphs of Set, the name of Set himself tends to be mutilated slightly, in order to avoid the taboo nature of his name. And also representations of Set are often made smaller than life size. Well, I don't know if you know that, but they kind of compared with the other images of the gods, they're often made smaller. And there's a piece of magic you can use if if you're being bullied and you want to do something about it without going too far. Do something psychologically powerful, then reduce always visualize your enemy as being smaller than you, or being very small. In fact, reduce them, visualize them as getting smaller, and visualize yourself as getting bigger is a kind of magical thing to do as well, to make yourself bigger. And you can go further than that. You can if they're really irritating you and you just want to kind of send a message, then you can forget their name. I mean, I do that all the time anyway. It's nothing malign. But changing someone's name to something a bit diminutive, that has a powerful psychological effect. Okay, so I wanted to just move on a little bit to another issue that is kind of related to Setians in a way, which is what takes us right into the heart of Setian mythology, one way or another. And that would be the issue of why it's said there are no witches in ancient Egypt. There are no witches in ancient Egypt, and strangely enough, it's sometimes said there are no witches in Egypt today. I'm probably going to have to talk about that a little bit to explain, because you're going to think, oh, of course there are witches in ancient Egypt. You've got all these stories of all these people, and there are witches, you know, there must be witches. But I'm kind of talking about a particular type of witch, really. Obviously, there are plenty of magical practitioners in Egypt. There's no shortage of that, as I'm sure you know. I'm, a book, right? A book that I talk a lot about books. I kind of got several books on this subject as well, right? Related, but I'll talk about someone else's very interesting book by the historian Ron Hutton called The Witch: History of Fear. That gives you a fairly good, it's a bit long, but it gives you an idea of what sort of witchcraft we're talking about. That might be missing in Egypt, and there's a reason. I mean, it's kind of, Egypt is often an exception to these kind of things. A witch, then, I should say as well in this book, it's interesting that for ages in the magic community we've been talking about how Egyptian magic and ideas from the ancient world have survived. Paganism has survived into the modern era, and so-called certain group type of historian has kind of said no. They've tried to debunk that for years and years, and the practitioners have said, well, it kind of seems to be true. The more we study this stuff, it seems to be the case. Sorry, I'm just looking at the message. Good message. But the funny thing is, Ronald Hutton, over the years, his books have kind of evolved more towards the practitioner point of view, really. Our intuition that certainly the Egyptian magic is still in use in the modern world. This latest book on the witch, strangely, is full of stuff from the Greek magical papyri and from the magical tradition that we're all working with quite a lot at the moment. And we're going to talk about a lot over the next few transmissions if you're interested. So he doesn't directly say this, but I think he's kind of had a conversion, really. Anyway, he says about witchcraft that a witch in the traditional sense, not in the revived Gardnerian sense, a witch is someone who causes harm by uncanny means, or a witch is someone who's an internal threat to a community, or a witch is someone who works within some sort of tradition, or a witch is evil in some way. And another thing is important to tell us about the witch, which is, as an historian, is the witch can be resisted. Why you'd want to resist? Well, so you get the idea. I think you get the idea. The witch, in a way, we're saying the witch is a victim as well. The witch is a kind of victim, as we're seeing, of false accusations of witchcraft or of causing harm. Most of these things, you know, about making the cow not give milk and all that sort of stuff, are false accusations. It's not really their fault. Sometimes it might be, I suppose. Anyway, you don't get that kind of accusation or witchcraft. You never get that in Egypt today. And you don't seem to have had that in the ancient world either. You get it everywhere else. You get it in Mesopotamia and all the countries around it. But for some reason, maybe because Egypt is such a magical place, you never get that kind of thing happening. Now, what is that? Which is rather remarkable. That's kind of remarkable. I mean, you can't probably, if you've never thought about that, you might think, God, that can't be true. They must have witches in Egypt. I mean, it's such a mysterious place. But they certainly have magical practitioners, but not in that evil sense. So, why is that? I mean, one day we could talk about there are some exceptions to this, even in Egypt, it has to be said. I mean, I suppose you might think, God, it's something that probably could be researched, but I think it is broadly true. And I think we could consider that witchcraft in Europe as well, or in Britain, in the British Isles, which is the only bit I know about really, but I think it's probably that accusations of witchcraft don't occur everywhere. They don't occur in Ireland, for instance, or is extremely rare in all that witch burning times for witches, for people to be accused of witchcraft in Ireland. And certainly they didn't have that kind of really violent reaction. So you've got this whole area that's quite conservative in some ways, you'd say religiously, but doesn't make that particular accusation. So that's like Egypt, Ireland. What is it about those places that where that doesn't happen? So one theory that is advanced for this, which will take us right back to the Setian thing, really, is a concept known as the evil eye, which again you can Google that and get some pictures of or something of the evil eye. But you've probably all heard about this, which is it's a kind of accidental ability to cause harm. An accidental ability to cause harm, to look at someone in such a way that they're harmed, or you put a jinx on them. You might not know you're doing it, but probably everybody at some point in your life, you meet someone who's kind of bad luck, really. They just got to look at you or look at your car or whatever, and it blows up. So one idea that's advanced in the book and has something going for it is that the belief in the notion of the evil eye has this kind of, you don't believe in both. If you believe in the evil eye, you tend not to believe in evil witchcraft. It's one or the other. Or if you like, if you might, someone who has the evil eye, you're not going to necessarily say they're a witch. You might just say they got the evil eye, and you use some sort of remedy to cure that, or an amulet. You use an amulet to reflect the evil eye back. So it's a slightly different mindset, really. So that's certainly worth looking into, that the belief in that evil eye. I mean, the other thing that might relate to Ireland is a belief in the fairies and the little people. The strong belief in the fairies in Britain as well. In certain, the stronger the belief in the fairies, the less witchcraft trials you have. And that's another reason why Ireland doesn't have any trials for witchcraft, because as is well known, belief in the fairies is very strong in Ireland. And I mean, it's slightly tricky, this, because belief in the evil eye is absolutely everywhere, really, in almost every country. But it has to be said that the belief in the evil eye is very well known in the Near East, in Egypt and in Mesopotamia and all the rest. It's kind of everywhere. It's Indo-European, it's Semitic. I mean, there's a contradiction. Sometimes witches are said to have the evil eye, just to sort of stick the spanner in the works, as it were. Anyway, if you're going to talk about this idea of the evil eye, putting the evil eye on someone, then Egypt is the place, right? Egypt is the source. Egypt is the mother of all theories about the evil eye, really. They probably all come from there, or it's certainly so strong there, the notion of the evil eye. You can't really avoid it. I mean, as I say, and of course, this brings us into the area of the ultimate creature that is capable of wielding the evil eye is, of course, Seth's enemy, or nemesis, or the enemy of Ra, the sun god, his father, is Apep, or Apophis, who's, I don't know, she, he, right? It's both are possible. You could call her the mother of all curses. It's a big thing in pharaonic Egypt, the magic connected with Apep. And of course, primary in the magic of the to do with the god Apep, which is really a popular thing or common thing to be doing in the temple, would be, this is this is our friend Seth, Lord Seth. This is his thing. This is Seth's USP, his purpose in life really, is the fact that he's, of all the other gods and goddesses in Egypt, he's the only one who can resist the evil eye of Apep. He can look him in the eye, and whereas everybody else is kind of thrown into a panic or hypnotized, like those guards in Ramesses the Third temple, they're hypnotized, they go into a trance and they can't wake up when they hear strange noises. Set is the only god who can look Apep in the eye and not be hypnotized, and fight him, really. And again, if you kind of Google for images of Apep fighting, sort of Set fighting the god Apep, you'll see this colossal serpent being speared by Set. And I mean, you know, different Setians have a kind of different take on this. It's almost like you're fighting fire with fire. Set is, there's something in Set that is a bit like Apep or Apophis. When you look at the stories about both of them, there's things, they're both the same colour, red, you know, red is quite important. They're both connected with the storm, Lord of the Storm and all this sort of stuff. So it wouldn't be an unreasonable theory to kind of think there's somehow two sides of the same story in some ways, and some Setians and some magicians in the modern world have gone that way. I kind of would say that. I don't know. I'm learning. There's certainly an idea, right? As someone put to me, a good friend, that a collaborator, that maybe you should, as a magician, be able to kind of look Apep in the eye, look chaos in the eye in some ways, and that's something I'm thinking about. Anyway, she, with her evil eye, paralyzes the crew of the boat, and we're only saved because of the power of Set, really, who's every day he used that power to stop chaos overcoming us. So as I said, Apophis, although there are no temples for Apophis in Egypt that I know of, she does, for some people, she does have deep mysteries of her own that some people actually worship. Maybe this is like really ancient religion before the building of temples. And see, sometimes some texts do refer to her as having followers, which is weird, but that's a discussion maybe we'll do on another day. It's a big issue, really. Good one. So, whilst there are no witches in Egypt then, in the traditional sense of where people accuse their neighbours of cursing them, there were, of course, many magical practitioners. In fact, everybody in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, was a magical practitioner, because magic is their religion. There's no real other way of putting it, really. So you can certainly find witches and all the rest, but so maybe that's another way, a society where everybody practices magic, or where everybody believes in the power of magic, and magic is the most important thing. Maybe you won't have that malign witchcraft, but you will have people using magic. The power of magic itself is amoral in a way. It's just the power of nature, sometimes called the Ach. I should say as well, in my view, yeah, in Egypt there isn't really a word for religion, that in the sense that we use it in the modern word. There's lots of words for magic, but not for religion. So that's why I'm kind of going with the idea that really magic is the religion. You know, that's what they practice. So, but you can certainly be a servant of the gods, in a sense of service. And you would actually sort of be a literal servant in a way. You would clean the place out, which again, in magic, that's kind of quite a common magical activity, to clean the shrine of the gods. Okay, so Whilst we might cast some doubt on whether people always had religion, right? And that's another thing. People don't, modern pagans, they don't kind of like the idea of religion in a way, because I understand why. We all understand why, because it's kind of been distorted. Someone's asking me a question. Do you think that Seth's role as netter of chaos allows him to face God of Chaos? Yeah, well, that's right. Allow him to face it. That's Steve. I might even have got that view from you or from a mutual friend. That yeah, Seth is fighting. I would say fighting fire with fire. There's something in Seth that allows him to confront the serpent of chaos, which is above this, that which other gods cannot do. Something special. So whereas some Setian groups today, yeah, they do see something quite special in the nature of Set, when they're talking about isolated or special consciousness or discriminating consciousness or whatever these different ideas. It's a very unusual concept, and he does seem to have something in common. I agree with you. Now, finally, then I just want to go back. Finally, for today, right? I've got some more material, but I've spoken for enough now, and you're kind of, you know, the sort of plan. But I just wanted to leave you with a little thing. The final thing, which is because I said this lecture is going to be about Heka, right? And so kind of, which is the word, the Egyptian word, which is translated as magic in later times. So Heka, there's kind of two bits to that word, Heka. The word ka, if you look at this on Google or something, ka, you may be familiar with that Egyptian word as a kind of double or image. So Heka means to make images, to make doubles in a way. And this kind of process of making images, which we talked a little bit about making images even at the beginning here, because someone's name is an image really, and the way they look, and the way they're buried, that's their image, and you're distorting their image, you're turning their image upside down, you're doing all sorts of things. So this is playing with images. This is not a peripheral activity in Egypt. This is the heart of the matter, really. This is the heart of magic. Is this imaginistic principle, or in the sense of, of making manipulation of images and statues, words, sounds. All these things are images in a way. This is the Egyptian art. That is so feared feared and respected in the ancient world. Everybody kind of takes this over, but everybody knows the Egyptians are the real people who were the best at this stuff. Still are, really, because we're talking about a living tradition of magic as well. I wanted to remind you that how important that notion is. If you cast your mind back to the book of Exodus, which I'm sure you know, when the ancient Hebrews left Egypt for reasons that people speculate, but there's a story, about when this took place, and they're wandering around in the Sinai desert for a long time, and sooner or later they get a new set of rules, which we know as, well, they get two sets, don't they? They get the first set, which they're thought not worthy to have, so they're kind of destroyed, and then they get a second set, which we don't know, nobody really knows. I suppose it's assumed that the second set is different to the first set, and because they were practicing an Egyptian ritual when Moses came down the mountain, maybe he had that in mind. So one of the most important, for our point of view, of the commandments is make no graven images. You mustn't make, according to the early Hebrews, you mustn't make images of gods. Now, considering where they've just come from, the culture they're leaving and the culture they're trying to kind of negate, they're trying to blank its image, really, for one reason or another, and define themselves negatively. as a culture that doesn't make images. It doesn't practice the imaginistic principle of the Egyptians. So really, that commandment, make no graven images, is it tells you everything you need to know about magic, really. And it tells you everything you need to know about because, as I say, the Egyptian culture, as you know, if you Google statues and images of Egypt and look at those, you can't think of another culture that is so visual, is such masters of the image as the Egyptians. Even modern artists, story I often tell about Francis Bacon, how he was going to become a sculptor until he saw Egyptian images in the museum and thought there's nothing left to do that the Egyptians haven't done in terms of making of images. They were masters that can never be surpassed, really, or they can be surpassed, but maybe there's nothing left. In terms of problems, if you're an artist, you're trying to represent certain things, you can make it, and then you'll go to Egypt and you'll find that they've done it for you. They've done it already thousands of years before. They are of the relation, which is what the magician is, Heka, the maker of doubles, the makers of images. Someone saying the Ten Commandments was a kind of attempt of execration of Egypt. Yeah, well, I mean, it certainly is trying to blanket. I don't know if it's execration. It's a negative definition. You're defining yourself as not like the people, the place we've just come from. That taboo about the making of images is common for other religions as well, and in later times in the magical traditions of say the Corpus Hermetica. The Corpus Hermeticum takes up this issue of statues, magical statues. These are not just works of art. These are objects that have been given the breath of life, which is the Egyptian secret. They are brought to life. This kind of technique of all the stuff, and the early Christians really didn't like this. They really didn't like it. And so whether that's because they were brought up, they were familiar with the early Hebrew text, or maybe they just know that this is maybe they thought it was kind of creepy in a way, scary, the way the Egyptians brought images to life and put breath into them and stuff. It's very, very powerful magic. And of course, yeah, well, there you go. Someone says it's a way of forbidding Heka. Yeah, well, I think maybe it is a way. If you don't allow people to make images, they cannot practice magic. And if you know in the story, of course, Moses had come down the mountain. But the weird thing is that the early Hebrews did actually make a lot of images as well. They did use image magic because he had that bronze serpent thing that people used to use to stop them being bitten by snakes. Apophis is an Apophis bit of magic there, but they were worshipping the goddess Hathor when they came down. They'd made the golden calf, the image of Hathor, whose sacred month it is at the moment. And that's a quintessential. That's a very, very Egyptian rite, really. So it must have been very. He must have seen that straight away and think, God, I've got to kind of get them out of this. And yeah, so in a way, for all time, into our modern time, the forbidding of image magic, the making of no grave, it also defines the pagan. It defines the modern pagan. The modern pagan it's actually using the same techniques from ancient Egypt. Although we don't always know where we got this stuff from. It's just come down to us. But that's why we are so different to the Christians in a way and the other religions, because of our manipulation of images, our wax image spells and our altars and our use of colours and correspondences, the whole thing, which I can't go into now. Image magic is us, really, and has been for a long time. It's a stream of magical tradition from ancient Egypt that is very strong and continues. And sometimes we forget where it comes from, so I'm kind of reminding you. So I say, don't bear that in mind. I'm not talking about artists, although these things are very artistic. I know that they are beautiful, but sometimes they're not artistic. Sometimes they're hideous in a way. Some of the images from Egypt. I mean, you're turning a human body into a statue when you mummify. It turns to stone, which is kind of a thing of a horror. And then you're putting a spirit inside it. So there's a kind of weird bit to this. Anyway, next time, because I've spoken enough now, next time in about 2 weeks' time, I'll carry on a little bit more, and I'm going to talk to you about a bit more about the imaginistic principle, and I'm going to talk about the power that people manipulate by the use of images, which is called the ack. And this will take us right into some very Sethian magical territory, really, and I think you'll enjoy it. But if you want to get a little bit ahead of us on the subject of the ack, I do actually have a book which will come out back to front, but you can Google it, and which is called Supernatural Assault in Ancient Egypt, and this really deals with the notion of the ack and the aku, these kind of almost like they can be ghosts sometimes, like the jinn of later times. There's a link between them. Anyway, that's what I'm going to be talking about in 2 weeks' time, because as some of you know, I'm also interested in Mukos, and I'm going to kind of alternate. There's a link between East and West, but anyway, another issue. So that's it for now, and thank you very much those who came and listened. I wish I could show you the pictures, but you can get them on Googly phone and everything like that. See, they're on that little thing. And I'll save this, and I'll also put it on YouTube later, but and I'll add the pictures. So thank you so much for coming, and do some magic. Thank you, Anna.